Most of us picture Apollo 11 as this pure, noble scientific triumph, right? A real pinnacle of human curiosity. Well, welcome to our explainer today because we are going to completely recontextualize this event. As we'll see, this wasn't just about science. It was actually the ultimate high-stakes battle of the Cold War, just fought with rockets, massive budgets, and human lives instead of traditional weapons.
To really grasp the sheer desperation behind this mission, we have to look back at President John F. Kennedy's famous quote. We've all heard these inspiring words, but knowing the historical context, we kind of have to ask, was this incredibly bold declaration actually about the romantic pursuit of science? Or, actually, scratch that. Was it a frantic, necessary maneuver to beat the Soviet Union before they claimed the ultimate high ground?
To understand the American panic at the time, just consider the terrifying, inciting shocks of the late 50s and early 60s. The Soviet Union wasn't just winning the space race, they were completely dominating it. In 1957, the Soviets successfully launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. The U.S. scrambles and barely manages to get one up in 1958. But then, bam, in 1961, the Soviets deliver another massive blow when cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin becomes the very first human in space. The U.S. was losing, and they were losing badly.
Can you imagine the sheer panic in Washington? Literally just 1 week after Gagarin orbited the Earth, President Kennedy fired off an urgent, almost desperate letter to his vice president. He demanded to know, are we making the maximum effort? He was literally asking if there was any space program, putting a lab in space, a trip around the moon, anything at all, that could produce dramatic results to give them a lead. They absolutely needed a win to prove their global supremacy.
So, to win this massive geopolitical wager, JFK basically wrote a blank check. He promised a lunar landing before the end of the decade, injecting an additional $7 to $9 billion, billion with a B, into the space program over just 5 years. That was a truly astronomical percentage of the federal budget at the time, all mobilized and intensely focused on a single, desperate aim.
But here's the crucial point. The sheer absurdity of this rushed deadline when you think about the massive technological limitations of 1961. Think about it for a second. There were no smartphones. There was no internet. GPS technology didn't even exist yet. And relying on computers that were, no joke, slower than a modern musical greeting card, they promised to safely send humans to the moon and back. The Cold War timeline didn't care about technological limits. It only cared about being first. That impossible deadline forced a breakneck, totally frantic sequence of tests. NASA relentlessly pushed forward, and tragically, that speed cost lives. In 1967, 3 astronauts died in a cabin fire during the Apollo 1 test on Earth. But the Cold War clock was ticking loudly. NASA didn't stop. They rapidly fired off unmanned launches, followed by manned orbits in Apollos 7 through 10, doing absolutely everything but landing, all setting the stage for July 1969. All of this immense pressure totally culminated during the actual landing climax. Imagine descending toward the moon in the lunar module and suddenly 1201 and 1202 alarms start blaring. At first, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin didn't even know what they meant. It turned out the guidance computer was literally overloading. Because they had to design these systems at lightning speed to beat the Soviets, the hardware was maxed out just trying to process the landing radar data. Because of the rushed nature of those early automated systems, Armstrong had to take over manually at just 150 meters up. He looked out the window and the computer was steering them directly into a deadly field of massive boulders. No way. He had to fly the module manually, skimming over the surface like a helicopter, taking them 4 miles completely off course from their planned target, just to find a flat, safe spot.
And man, that manual flying burned a lot of precious fuel. Get this, 5%. With only 5% fuel remaining in the tanks, Mission Control back on Earth initiated a terrifying 30-second abort countdown. If they didn't touch down in 30 seconds, they would have to abort the entire mission. Literally at the very last second, Armstrong radioed, "Roger, tranquility." The Eagle had landed.
Okay, so they won the race to the surface, but the high-stakes danger definitely didn't end there. After stepping on the moon, they had to return. But how exactly do you start a broken lunar engine? See, when Armstrong was first squeezing out of the module's small door in his heavy suit, he accidentally hit and snapped off a crucial piece of equipment, the ascent engine arming switch. Without that switch, they could not ignite the engine to return to orbit. They'd beaten the Soviets, but now they were stranded.
So what saved this multi-billion-dollar, high-stakes Cold War mission? A 50-cent ballpoint pen. I kid you not. In an incredibly tense moment of makeshift engineering, Buzz Aldrin realized the broken switch just needed something to complete the electrical circuit. He grabbed a simple ballpoint pen, jammed it into the mechanism to complete the circuit, and successfully reignited the engine.
And believe it or not, even the return trip to Earth was a victory hanging by an absolute thread. Before re-entering the atmosphere, the service module was supposed to detach and use thrusters to fly safely away from the command module where the astronauts were sitting. Well, those thrusters failed. Instead of flying safely away, the service module essentially broke apart right alongside them. The astronauts watched out their window as massive pieces of debris threatened to smash into their capsule and cause a fatal collision in space. It's an absolute miracle they survived.
If you want to understand the true mindset of the era, just listen to this. It's totally chilling. This is an alternate speech prepared for President Nixon, ready to be read to the world in case the astronauts were killed and left on the moon. These two men are laying down their lives. It shows just how uncertain this whole endeavor was. They pushed the limits of human capability for geopolitical dominance, fully accepting that these men might be left to die 238,000 miles from home.
Now, because this Cold War victory seems so impossibly rushed, it birthed massive conspiracy theories, fed by paranoia. Take the famous fluttering flag myth. People ask, how can a flag wave with no air? Well, the reality is just simple engineering. NASA specifically engineered the flag with a horizontal rod along the top so it would stay visible. But the rod jammed, causing a ripple effect in the fabric. Plus, the spring-like aluminum pole vibrated when the astronauts let go. It wasn't wind, it was just physics and a slightly broken rod.
Then there's the classic claim that because no stars are visible in the photos, it must have been filmed on a soundstage. But think about how cameras actually work for a second. This was a daytime landing. The sun was shining intensely, and the astronauts were wearing bright, highly reflective white spacesuits. Just like trying to take a photo on your phone at night with the flash on, the camera simply couldn't capture faint background starlight against such extreme glare.
But honestly, the ultimate proof of the mission's reality lies in the Cold War itself. Think about it. If this was a fake Hollywood production by America, the Soviet Union would have exposed it instantly. Instead, America's greatest geopolitical enemy officially acknowledged the Apollo 11 landing as absolute fact. The Great Soviet Encyclopedia literally published it as the third historic event of the space age. They didn't cry foul, they completely conceded the race.
Aside from winning a geopolitical standoff, this mission accidentally revolutionized the modern world. NASA's insatiable demand for early integrated circuits to build their guidance computers forced companies like IBM into overdrive. This massive demand scaled up production, dropping microchip prices by 90% in just a few short years, and ultimately paving the way for the smartphone in your pocket.
But of course, beating the Soviets and sparking a tech revolution came with a truly astronomical price tag. In the 1960s, the Apollo program drained $24 billion from the Treasury. To really let that magnitude sink in, adjusted for inflation, that is the equivalent to well over $100 billion today.
So, with the ultimate Cold War victory achieved, the spell kind of broke. By 1972, the American public was exhausted. They were dealing with the ongoing Vietnam War and rising domestic income inequality. Critics started asking, why are we exploring a dead rock when we could build, say, 120 Harvard-sized universities right here on Earth? Because of this pressure, public fascination ended, politicians cut the funding, and the Apollo program was abruptly shut down after Apollo 17.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to look at the true legacy of Apollo 11. It wasn't just a peaceful voyage. It was a mission born from fear, rushed by fierce geopolitical rivalry, fraught with near-fatal disasters, and executed with technology that is ancient by today's standards. It left us with incredible computer advancements, but at a massive financial toll. Which leaves us with this final, provocative question to consider. Was winning the Cold War space race actually worth the astronomical cost?